Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Now, in other news, we see candidate Jeb Bush coming out and saying that he would have invaded Iraq, just like his brother. That's why we don't need another S.O.B. as president, another son of a Bush. He says that pointed out that the Democrat frontrunner Hillary Clinton also voted for authorization for the use of force in Iraq before the invasion. Well, I would say we don't want her either. I don't think so. But anyway, he says, given the intelligence that we were confronted with, pretty much everybody would have done that. See, what they would not do is question the intelligence. They would never question what they get from the CIA, is what he's saying. I guess he's concerned that maybe if he did, he'd be labeled a conspiracy theorist for being a skeptic, for wanting information, for doing research, for digging down and seeing what's really behind this. No, just go along with the consensus no matter what happens. Now, he was in Liberty University lauding his Christian conscience this weekend. He was telling them that that was one of the most important things you can have. He says there's no more powerful or liberating influence on earth than a Christian conscience in action, implying that that's what he has. It says he didn't talk about his efforts as governor to save the life of a severely brain-damaged woman, Terry Schiavo, whose husband sought to remove her from her feeding tube over the objection of her parents. Quote, that made him a hero to the Right to Life movement, said Jerry Falwell's son. Well, you know what? Didn't make him a hero to me. Didn't make him a hero to a lot of people in the Right to Life movement, because we understood that he had the power, just like he had the power, or his brother had the power, to take a look at the intelligence. Jeb Bush had the power to stop that execution by a probate judge, slowly starving her to death. At the time, it was one of the most hypocritical things I've ever seen in my life to see the Bush brothers parading about their Christian connections with people like the Falwells while they were also starving a woman to death. He had the power, he had the authority, he could have stopped it, but he didn't. But here he is at Liberty University telling people that he's going to stop Obamacare because that could they've tried to use that to force abortions on people. He aborted a fully grown adult. He allowed a probate judge who was under him to do it. He could have stopped it. He did nothing. That's the kind of hypocrisy that we can expect to see from Bush, the kind of go along to get along and the no respect for life, whether it's one individual or whether it's an entire country like Iraq that you unleash massive warfare on without any reason whatsoever. Now, stay with us. Right after the break, we have a special report about this homeschooling family in Kentucky that had their 10 children kidnapped by CPS and the Sheriff's Department because they were off the grid. And after that, we're going to talk to someone who made the trip from New York City to living off the grid in Montana, and the obstacles that he overcame, the financial obstacles as well as the health obstacles that he had to overcome in order to do that. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Child Protective Services. The name says it all. CPS claims that they are out to protect children from abusive and neglectful parents, but is that just a ruse in order to take healthy children away from good families? To place them in the foster care system where they receive bounties from the federal government? That's right, the average reimbursement to state and local government for each child taken into foster care is about $6,000 a month. The foster care provider receives about $600 a month of that. Therefore, each one of these kids forced into foster care are worth approximately $5,000 to CPS.
2 foster parents had criminal records, a son living there with multiple felonies, and a convicted sex offender visiting and sometimes caring for the children. She refused to arrange an adoption. Her CPS supervisors responded with this memo recommending the adoption should proceed quickly.
Our theory is that the basis for this is the tie to the federal money, that every time a child is not placed in a home, the state of Kentucky, through its cabinet, is losing federal money.
Child Protective Services in Pennsylvania was at her doorstep taking her one-day-old baby because they thought Liz was abusing drugs. But what the hospital didn't consider more closely was poppy seeds.
Grab your baby and don't resist and don't fight me, okay?
We reached
reached out to CPS. They say they can't specifically comment on this case because of privacy law, but we wanted to know what the rules are and what rights parents have. CPS says we conduct a risk assessment of the child's safety and rely heavily on the direction of healthcare providers. And now Anna and Alex find themselves fighting for Sammy's return and for their rights as parents.
Where there's children, there are pedophiles. But they're in schools and they're in churches and they're everywhere where they can get their hands on children. So we know that that's true. And it's got to be brought to an end. It's got to be completely exposed for what it is. And in my opinion, it needs to completely be dissolved. I don't see any good left in Child Protective Services.
Senator Nancy Schaefer and her husband Bruce were found dead today at their Havisham County home.
The bodies of former state Senator Nancy Schaefer and her husband Bruce were found today at their Havisham County home. Investigators say both had been shot.
Preliminarily, it looks to be a murder-suicide. The GBI has 6 agents on the scene, 2 crime scene specialists. There will be a thorough investigation.
CPS adversary Senator Nancy Schaefer and her husband's life met a very abrupt end. There are far too many oddities surrounding her life for it to have been anything but an assassination due to her outspoken crusade to uncover one of the prime child smuggling areas in the United States, Atlanta, Georgia. Bruce was retired and the couple didn't appear to be in any type of dire financial crisis. Friends who knew the couple best state that Bruce would simply not have had the capability to kill his wife. Nancy was actively exposing corruption within the Department of Family and Child Services, including actions by the DFCS director in the county where she lived. Nancy's husband, Bruce, was highly supportive of Nancy's work for decades and would have had little or no reason to suddenly try to kill her at such a critical juncture in her career.
Imagine you're a happy family living in Central Texas in a suburb of Austin, Round Rock. And one night you decide to smoke some marijuana after your 2-year-old daughter's gone to bed while you watch a movie. Something over 100 million Americans are estimated to do every single week. A good secret police neighbor smells the marijuana, calls the police, and they come with the CPS and take your 2-year-old happy daughter who'd never been in the hospital and never been sick and never been beaten up. You go for weekly visits with your daughter, and she's dirty. She's confused. She has black eyes, bruises. Mold is growing on her body and her clothing. You go to the state and say, she's being abused, help her. And they laugh at you. And a month later, you get the call. She's on life support. Her head has been caved in. 2 days later, they take her off life support, and she dies. Another victim of this tyrannical government that we have that is incentivizing the states to seize as many children as they can. Over 1 million of them a year.
Police seized 10 children from an off-grid homeschool family in Kentucky on Wednesday after receiving an anonymous tip about the family's traditional lifestyle.
They're saying they're unvaccinated and that, quote, they didn't have proof they were getting full schooling. There's no law against homeschooling, not yet. They're trying to pass them in, 3 different states right now. But this is just crazy, and I see these articles all the time. There's a new one in WorldNet Daily today where they show up and say, we want to see your vaccine records, and we want to make sure that you don't have any guns. Well, you're allowed to have guns, and you're allowed to not vaccinate. So the government's claiming that it's neglect when it's not neglect, plus there's no judge or jury.
The nightmare story began when sheriff's officers set up a blockade around Joe and Nicole Nogler's rural property before entering the premises. 8 of the kids were out with their father, but Nicole and 2 of her oldest children were at home. Nicole attempted to drive away but was subsequently stopped and arrested for resisting, attempting to prevent officers from taking her 2 boys away.
The refusal to say, no, you will not talk to my children, no, you will not do that. The court is going to step in, and I think that they will remove your children. And they will talk to your children whether you like that or not.
So
I don't have a
no
dog
right as a
in this
parent.
fight. Other than I'm telling you,
I have constitutional rights. I have rights as a parent, and my children won't speak to anybody
constitutional rights
without my permission, without an attorney or anything.
If there's non-compliant and we get those court orders and the things that you're posting on Facebook are true, 10 ways to deal with the police and
you guys are stalking my page. I'm glad you guys read stuff.
Blah, we will bring a SWAT team in here and do what we have to do.
The sheriff then demanded Joe Nogler turn over the 8 children by 10 a.m. the next day or face felony charges, an order with which he complied. They are an extremely happy family, said family friend Pace Ellsworth, who asserts that the Noglers were targeted because of their back-to-basics life.
They have a whole lot of kids. They are educating their children themselves. Their children thrive on healthy foods the family grows and raises themselves. And they have a 26-acre private playground on which to play and get exercise. The horror! As you can see, they're extremely open about the way they live, and they just want it to be accepted. There are people that don't understand that and that misrepresent the way that they live. And because of that, it's sort of satisfied a vendetta for the sheriff against them.
Friends reported no concerns about how the children were being treated by their parents, who follow an educational model called unschooling, where the children decide their own curriculum based on the subjects that interest them and what their strengths are. The family have set up a GoFundMe page to try and raise money for legal expenses. A website for the family spells out their plight with the heart-wrenching words. This Kentucky family of 12 people, 6 dogs, 2 farm cats, and a few random farm animals was just torn apart. Their crime? Living a simple, back-to-basics life. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, a WorldNet daily report highlights how parents were interrogated by a CPS caseworker who questioned Christopher Zimmer and his wife Nicole on everything from their son's homeschool education to questions about vaccines and guns in the house. The Zimmers are now suing the CPS for $60 million in a case before the U.S. District Court in Trenton, New Jersey. John Bound for Infowars.com.
From the water table to our soils to the atmosphere itself, our world is becoming more and more toxic each and every day. But it's not just the air outside that's toxic. Indoor air has been shown to have 2 to 5 times higher concentrations of pollutants than even outdoor air. And most Americans spend 90% of their time inside using toxic chemicals within their homes. There are more than 42 million smokers in the United States. Well over 1,000 types of mold and mildew linked to numerous conditions. And don't forget the fact that 6 million Americans live with pets they're allergic to as well. When I began to research these statistics, it was clear to me it was time to start cleansing my lungs in order to combat the toxic environment that we cannot escape, but that we can fight back against. Made with organic and wild cultivated herbs and manufactured in the USA, the new Infowars Life Lung Cleanse is here in a convenient spray bottle that can be brought with you throughout any toxic environment. Now available exclusively at InfowarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.